So thanks for being here, Jesse.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Decagon is the hottest, I believe is the hottest AI startup right now. So we're really excited to learn from you. The first question I have for you is, you have really great brands as customers, such as Hertz, Oura Ring, and Chime. But the sort of the general space of AI agents engaging with customers is becoming quite competitive. How do you sort of cut through the noise and make sure that you stand out towards your customers?
First of all, thanks for having me. I'm very, very happy to be here and talking to all of you. So yeah, I would say pretty much every AI space is pretty competitive right now, just because it's a very hot industry. There's a lot of founders. It's pretty easy to raise money. Customers really want different types of AI applications as well. So anytime there's an idea that has a bit of traction, there's going to be a lot of people that want to compete in it. And so I don't think it's that different than any other SaaS space that's happened in the past, where there are these openings where a new opportunity is available and a lot of people build in it. And generally, in the short term, the people that get ahead are the ones that build faster or execute better and have a more aggressive sales motion and so on. So I think in the short term, everyone's starting from the same playing ground, and so the people that execute better and move faster get a little bit of an edge. And then long term, you want to kind of identify what is the sort of dimension that you want to double down on, and where you have conviction that this is where we are uniquely positioned to do well and be our competitive differentiator. And I would say for Decagon in particular, I think we've really sort of consolidated around this concept of AI agents and AI in general should be really easy to build. And by default, it is not. By default, you need a lot of engineers, you need a lot of technical people to go in and configure your AI agent for you. But at Decagon, we've really pushed this theme that, hey, it should be really easy for these non-technical people at our customers to go in and build the agent, to give it instructions, to iterate, to run tests, and so on. And so we've kind of been leading there for a bit, and that's why we've been able to get a lot of big customers, is that they really like this approach. And our vision is that we just want to stay ahead on that dimension.
You sort of touched on a little bit. So in your first meetings, what's usually your punchline? So what's some of the first key facts or figures that you try to deliver to your potential customers, especially in the first meeting?
Yeah, so in the first meeting, we start off by just understanding their problem, right? And we want to basically get across of our general concept of what are we doing for you. And almost always it's the same things. It's number one, we will save you a ton of money because the AI agents are going to replace a lot of the human services labor that you currently need in your contact center or your call center and your customer service operation. Number two, we're going to make it so that your customers are happier because we can really increase the NPS scores or the customer satisfaction because customers are no longer waiting on hold, or they're not being forced down a decision tree. That it's a lot more flexible, right? So those are the two things we generally establish. And for a lot of our customers, we kind of show them the case studies we've done in the past. Like you mentioned, one of the customers we work with is Chime. It's the biggest sort of neobank in the US. And we were able to reduce their entire contact center costs by over 60%. And at the same time, their customer satisfaction score went up about 2x. And so it's a very easy business case there. And so we generally paint that picture when we first talk to customers. And then that's kind of like the punchline, so to speak, of why even work with us in the first place.
Interesting. The customer satisfaction score, that increases because, is it just the time to respond is faster, or is there other aspects of the customer experience or the engagement that you guys improve on?
So there's a couple things. Yeah, one is the time to response, or just time to resolution, I guess, because it's infinitely scalable. You can talk to it 24/7 in any language. It knows everything about you. So number one. Number two is that it's actually better at giving responses because it has access to all your data and it can take actions for you. So it can actually process the inquiry you have a lot faster and get to the right answer faster. And then the third I would just say is consistency, because humans are not perfect, and you may get someone who is a new agent or had a bad day or whatever. It doesn't really matter. There's pretty high variance in all these contact centers. And so if you're able to provide a good experience that's very consistent, then that will naturally lead to higher satisfaction.
I was reading the case study that you had with Oura Ring, And I think you mentioned at a different interview where initially the customers, 1 out of 3 customers would ask to speak with a human when they engage with the Decagon agent. And then you guys improved that to be 1 out of 20 inquiries ask for a human. Like, how did you make that happen and like change the experience or the expectation with the end user?
So here's 3 general case studies of types of companies that have used Decagon. So here I was talking about Oura Ring. So Oura is one of the most popular wearable rings out there. I don't know, people here might have them, and they're growing super fast. And when they came to us, they wanted to explore using AI agents and using Decagon because they were growing so fast and they didn't want to scale their customer service operations at the same rate that they were growing, because that's very difficult and very expensive. And at the same time, they also had this metric they were tracking, which is the ask for human rate, which is a lot of their customers, similar to all of us, probably similar to me. Whenever you get to a customer service line and it feels like a robot, you just try to get to a human as soon as possible. So it's just like agent, or you press 0, or like get me to a human. And that was happening in 1 in 3 times before we adopted AI. And as we implemented with them, we kept tracking this metric. And now that we're fully live and rolled out to all their users, it's now 1 in 20. So it went down a lot. And that's a very significant metric, because what that is showing you is that you're actually able to change the behavior of end users. Like, why was it 1 in 3 in the first place? It's that a lot of customers were they had lost trust in automated systems and in chatbots. And so if you're able to really show them immediately that this is a completely different experience, then it's very helpful for them. Yeah, and then I'll quickly touch on the other 2. So I briefly talked about Chime before as well. Chime was actually a very different scenario. They also wanted to adopt Gen AI, but they actually cared less about the cost savings and more about the customer experience, because they know that their customer experience score directly correlates to new revenue. And the higher the customer experience score, the more retention they get, the more conversion they get for people to actually sign up. And so that was the North Star metric, and we were able to move that up by 2 to 2.5x, which is very exciting. And then the final example here is Hertz, the big car rental agency. It's a very different company from the other 2. It was a 100-year-old company. And when they came to us, of course, same thing, right? They cared about customer satisfaction. They cared about cost savings. But actually, the number 1 thing they cared about was speed, because they knew that they were a fairly slow business. I mean, every business that's over 100 years is probably pretty slow. And so they had already done a lot of research around Gen AI and the use cases, and so they had a lot of conviction in the customer service use case. And so we were able to actually take them live in a little less than 6 weeks, which for an enterprise of their size was fairly pleasant. And the reason we were able to do that is that AI agents are actually, if you do them well, you can make them very flexible and make them easy to program. And so that's, again, that goes back to what we view as our biggest differentiator, is that we make it really easy to build these AI agents, because the thing with AI agents is that it's not just like you build it and then you're done. They're living and breathing things. They constantly need to be updated. They constantly need to learn new things and get feedback. And so because we make that easy, we were able to go live pretty quick.
I'd love to dig deeper into that. Before we go into that, the Oura Ring case, like I remember I actually went on the Oura Ring website and tried to do an inquiry. And I remember I had the impression where it basically told me that like it's a new experience and you should try me out kind of thing. Like you sort of set the expectation. And was that sort of strategic in a sense, that you sort of give the impression to you should just try me out kind of impression, so that people actually would try to use the Decagon agent?
Yeah, definitely. Because it goes back to what I was saying, right? Like, part of the job of an AI agent in this space is to re-earn the trust of the end customer. And so it's all just about like, give us a chance, because it is different than what you're used to, right? What you're used to is probably not a great experience, because it's just forcing you down a path. And so it's fully flexible. It's truly like a ChatGPT-like experience, and that's what makes it powerful.
I thought that was very smart, because actually, the tone and everything, like it just wanted to make me give it a try, right, before even requesting a human. So I thought that was pretty neat. Going back to, so you said 6 weeks to deploy fully. Could you walk us through how your customer engagement model works? So do you start off with like a paid pilot or a free to use period? And is it like, do you only cover like a certain small percentage of the inquiries first? Like, how does that work?
It kind of varies from customer to customer. So we serve mostly the top end of the market. And even then, there's a bit of a spectrum of smaller deals all the way up to like the biggest companies in the world. And so, of course, the biggest companies of the world, you have to be pretty hands-on. I know I saw when Eric was here a little bit ago, he was talking about the forward deploy model. Like that is very necessary for the top end of the market, because if you're working with a big airline or with a big bank, there's just gonna be so much custom stuff there, or there's just so many nuances that even if they could self-serve it in our platform, like we want to be there to help them to make sure that it's done correctly. But then as you move down to slightly smaller companies, you want the process to also reflect higher speed and higher scalability. And so you try to do less of the long dragged out POCs there, and either you do like a very clean scope pilot, or you just validate the value before doing a pilot and before just signing a deal off the bat. And so there's a bit of a spectrum there, and I would say the more you are on the smaller end of the spectrum, the more you want to avoid long pilots and long POCs.
Interesting. And whenever you end up doing a pilot, what is it that you're trying to prove to them? Like, is there a specific metric that you've agreed on that that would get you the full deployment?
Yes. Yeah. So it's almost always the two metrics I mentioned, which is what percentage of the conversations can the AI resolve? So people call that resolution rate, or it's their customer satisfaction score. And so those are the two primary metrics. And then there might be some secondary ones, like sometimes in certain evals, there might be an accuracy score where their humans will manually QA everything and give you a sense of how well the AI is doing. Or we might encourage them to also try to quantify how easy it is to iterate on the AI, because we view that as our differentiator. We want to give them some sort of quantifiable metric of like how easy is this to maintain over time.
Is that resolution rate sort of in comparison to human, or is it totally different? Is that totally disconnected?
So resolution rate is kind of defined as the percentage of conversations that don't need to get to a human. It's kind of independent from what humans can do, but you want that to be high as possible because you want to minimize what gets to a human. And so, for a lot of our top customers, we can get that to 70, 80, 90%. And that means that, the vast majority of their conversations never have to even reach a human. And so the humans get to focus on the hard ones, or the ones that require a little bit more sort of cognitive ability.
How do you deal with like sort of high stakes actions like refunds or reissuing? Like, are customers usually comfortable with having an agent just process all of that, or do they require like a human in the loop in that process?
Good question. So sometimes it requires a human in the loop, but actually I would argue that for all of our customers, it's pretty safe to just give that to the AI for a couple different reasons. One, every time an AI takes an action, it will confirm with the customer first. So it's never taking an action without their approval. And then on the flip side, when you actually take actions, it's not just taking actions willy-nilly. You can kind of think of it as an AI agent is there. It's kind of understanding all the logic. It's thinking through what to do. And when it decides it needs to do something, it calls on a tool. So it's kind of like AI agent is operating, and then you can give it a bunch of tools. And one of the tools could be process refund. But inside that tool, you can bake in guardrails. So you can say that this tool is not going to process a refund if X, Y, Z are not true, and that's built in code. So the AI can never make a mistake there, and so you can actually structure it in a way where it's very safe and robust for enterprises, because you have the AI handling the business logic in the same way a human would. But then for all the super important stuff, all the actions that you're taking, you can hard code that stuff in the tool. And that makes it so that you're never getting in a situation where people get like double refunds, or refunds when they're not supposed to, and so on. So for some of our customers, we do process refunds, and it's just kind of like you're just saving manpower there.
And you give the flexibility to the customer, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. And you mentioned about forward deployed engineers. I would love to hear your view on that. And does Decagon have FDEs?
Yeah, so my view is that forward deployed engineers are a little bit over sensationalized, because everyone is using that term, but I think the term means a lot of different things. The original definition of forward deployed engineer came from Palantir in the US. It's a big company that serves the mega enterprises and governments, and so they're closing $25 million deals or $50 million deals off the bat. And that's great because if you close one of those, let's just hire some engineers and just staff them just to that account so they can get up and running because there's a lot of custom work to do, right? And on the other end of the spectrum, you have companies that are fully self-serve, like product-led growth companies. Like Notion would be a good example, right? You just sign up and then you're done. So every company is somewhere along that spectrum. Almost no company is full forward deployed in the sense of Palantir. I would say we're a little bit in the middle, probably a little bit closer to the Palantir side. And so we do have engineers that take on work specific to certain customers. But because we're not closing $25 million deals off the bat, they're not fully forward deployed. We cannot just dedicate them to a single customer. And so everyone's trying to find the balance. I think the reason why this role is hot is that for AI agents in general, there is a lot of customization to be done from customer to customer. And so that's where they're effective, especially in the early days. You can really rely on forward deploy, or just we call them agent engineers actually, but you can rely on them to work directly with customers and craft the agents. But I do think over time, you benefit a lot from moving as far on the other end of the spectrum as you can because things are more scalable and so on. So I think everyone has to discover where along the spectrum you are, and then that will kind of inform how heavy you can rely on forward deployed resources.
I'd love to hear more about AOPs, so Agent Operating Procedures. Can you explain it to me what it is and who's involved and how that works behind the scenes?
Yeah, of course. So luckily we have this slide here. So I said before that when we first started building in the space, we felt that, okay, well, this concept is not super new, right? People have been trying to put automation in front of customer service or the contact center for a while. And so what did we feel was the biggest limiting factor? And when we talked to a lot of these enterprises, we felt that it's just so costly and sort of difficult to maintain these systems because they end up kind of being these big configurations of decision trees or config files or people actually writing code in an SDK. And so you need engineers or technical people to come in and maintain it. So number one, that's costly and it takes a lot of time because you have to wait for those resources to free up. But then it also just gets so complicated that it's actually pretty difficult to map out all the business logic you need. And once you get to these big enterprises, if you're talking to airline, for example, this decision tree could be massive. So we actually felt that one of the biggest and most powerful aspects of Gen AI is not only that it can have a great conversation because that's what it's trained for, but also it's able to understand instructions very well. You're able to write instructions in plain English, and AI can understand it. And so we kind of invented this new format that we call an agent operating procedure, AOP. It's named after an SOP, which is what humans use. So the way you teach your human agents is you write SOPs for them. There's kind of instruction manuals. So it's like an SOP, but for the AI. So we call it AOP. And AOP is plain English or any language. You write an instruction manual, and the AI is able to understand it and process it and figure out how to execute it in a very performant way. And the main benefit of AOPs is that you're able to make the whole process a lot more fluid and a lot more low effort. And so you can really empower the non-technical people on the team to understand what's going on, to make changes, to iterate, and to move way faster. And so we feel that this is a big competitive differentiator because now our customer can empower a lot of their team to go in and make progress a lot faster. So they're able to get to higher resolution rates and higher customer satisfaction a lot faster. And I made this comment earlier where we really have the strong belief that in this new era of AI agents, when you ship an AI agent to the end user, sometimes it's just static and you're done, right? And they can just use that AI agent and just keep going. But in our space, that's actually not the case because the AI agent needs to constantly learn. The product's going to change, the processes are going to change, the way that you handle conversations is going to change. And so you need a way for the AI to almost learn over time and to kind of be a living, breathing organism, like I said before. And so that's what this allows. It allows the iteration speed to be a lot faster, so you can continuously update it.
Interesting. So I guess it would abstract the logic and then I guess doing the debugging as well, maybe for how the agent responds to the inquiries. And that is in a format where it's, I guess, easy to understand by a regular human.
Exactly. Yeah. So any non-technical person can go in and see exactly what it's executing. Make tweaks, run tests. Right. You can run an A/B test, and over time it'll kind of self-process all the conversations it's having and make suggestions for how to update these AOPs. And then you as a user, you're almost just like managing the logic, and it's just a lot faster to understand what's going on and make changes.
Interesting. And is the expectation that the end user or your customer actually deals with this interface directly, or do you have sort of like AOP engineers or something like that that supports that?
Yeah, so that's what agent engineers do, but it also is an end interface. So everything's in the product, and so we've taken a very product-heavy approach, and it allows our customers to go in and change the AOPs and read them and understand, but we also have our staff there to help them if they need it.
Interesting. Would that mean that the post-sales process for like an AI agent startup would be a little bit more prolonged and maybe in some cases more costly compared to maybe a typical SaaS company? Or?
Yeah, that's a very keen observation. I would say by default, yes. And so that is why we are investing so much in this approach, is to really make that the post-maintenance scalable. I do think there are some AI agents where you're not really responsible for updating over time. Like I would say like most of the coding AI agents, you're just kind of unleashing them on your code base, and you don't have to maintain the logic yourself. But in the world of customer service in the contact center, there's a lot of logic that needs to be maintained, and so that needs to constantly get updated. And so that's why I think I keep saying in our space more than anything else, like the agent needs to be very flexible and dynamic and constantly changing. And for that reason, the iteration speed is so important.
Interesting. You probably get this question a lot, but what becomes a moat in the AI agent world?
It really just depends on the space you're in. I would say in our particular space, if you can get to a point where your AI agent is constantly improving with the more conversation it has, then that naturally becomes a moat, because for the next person to come along, they have to not only be better than your agent, they also have to be better than your agent plus like a year of training data, and that's just quite difficult. So that's number one. And then two, if the AI agent is very integrated into your systems and it's hooking into all these APIs to take actions and so on, that's also much harder to replicate. So I think in the AI agent world, the sort of types of stickiness and types of moats are roughly the same in my mind to normal SaaS, where you have systems of records, systems of behavior as they're called, and you can even say there's like this could be called like a system of intelligence, where we're storing all their business logic somewhere. And so for someone else to come in, they just have to be able to replace a lot.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, the customer has to invest a lot, right, to sort of train the agent and refine the agent and those kind of things. And that invested time becomes, I guess, a lock-in into your product.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. So I wanted to talk about labor-centric ROI pricing. How do you frame the conversation with customers about pricing against labor?
Yeah, so if you look at the like our industry, for example, where is the money going right now? Like right now, they probably have some software, right? They might be using Salesforce and so on. And so if that is part of the pie, there's probably about 10x of that being spent on human labor. And that's being spent in the form of outsourced like BPOs. You might have a huge call center and somewhere in the world, or maybe it's in-house as well. And then there's also all these supporting human labor sort of functions in addition to the call center. Like let's say you have a 10,000 person call center. You probably also have like a couple hundred people on the side whose job is to like monitor these conversations and do quality assurance and make sure nothing's going wrong. And so what we try to do is, okay, well, let's say we can quantify how much value we're providing. And again, that's actually a nice property of the space, is that because there's this resolution rate metric, you can actually use that to say like, okay, well, if we're doing a good job, we're saving you at least this much money. And then you can kind of do the math to see like, okay, we're saving you this much money, you're only paying us a fraction of that, so it's very high ROI for you, and for us, we're kind of benchmarking our work to human labor. So that's kind of like the pressure to have larger contracts. And again, that's been a nice property about the AI agents as a space in general, because you can really try to benchmark yourself to services spend instead of just software spend. because we're not trying to replace their sales force, right? We're not trying to replace whatever software spend they're doing. We're eating into this much bigger pie. And the downward pressure is that there might be other alternatives. Like there might be a not so good solution, but doesn't really have Gen AI, but it still maybe does like some part of the work. And so you're always trying to find the right balance in between those two. And for us, we generally price per work output to try to benchmark to human labor. So that could be per conversation, right? Like maybe we know that you're paying on average $5 per conversation right now, and we can make it $1. And so you're saving $4, and yeah, that's kind of like the ROI math.
Do customers ever haggle you, like because the definition of resolve could be different, right? And some resolutions could be more complex, some can be very simple. Like, does that ever happen, or is it quite simple and straightforward whenever you talk to customers?
That's definitely true, but I think that gets kind of averaged out in the resolution rate because you're handling all the conversations. And so what customers want to see, at least when you're kind of originally building, is they want to see that it is possible to handle complexity. And so we generally tell them like, hey, for us to build an example AOP for you, just choose one of your complex workflows that you would be very impressed if an AI could do it. And then we were able to show them, okay, actually it's quite easy. You just kind of write the instructions this way, and then you use these tools, and bam, you're done. And now next step is we can test it for you. You can build all these simulations inside Decagon to give you confidence that this AOP is working, and then that allows them to move faster.
Interesting. Some people say it's going to be the end of seat-based pricing. Do you believe in that, or is that only a certain segment?
I would say broadly, I think that's true. I mean, most of the time when you're deploying an AI agent, the goal is for it to be super scalable and for it to replace the work of as many humans as you need to kind of doing that specific job. And so the seat-based side of things doesn't really make as much sense because you're not really benchmarked by like how many people are logging in and using the product. You're more benchmarked by the output. And so that by the way, is one big reason why it's actually been a nice time for startups right now, because the incumbents have this problem where if they aggressively lean into this new pricing model, they cannibalize a lot of their own business. So if you think about something like Salesforce, massive company, very successful, they want to lean into agents very heavily. But the sales team kind of has a bit of a problem because almost all their revenue right now is from seat-based pricing. And if they were to tell people to switch over to agents, all that seat-based pricing goes away. So that means they have to price the agent in a way where they're not losing money and losing revenue on the seat-based side. And so that makes it just gives you a ton more friction to roll something out. Yeah, I would say most of the sort of agents I've seen are not really seat-based, but there's also like I would argue that Cursor is probably seat-based, right? Where it's kind of like $20 a month per user or something like that. So if it's kind of like an agentic tool that helps employee be more productive, maybe a seat-based model still makes sense.
Interesting. I want to talk about the growing conversation in Silicon Valley about the 996 style work culture. And for the audience, actually, so it's actually a foreign concept in Japan. But so for the audience, so 996 means you start working from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. 6 days a week, right? So that people are talking about in Silicon Valley. Is this a result of like hyper competition in AI? Like, why is this happening in Silicon Valley?
I think if I'm super honest, I think it's happening because a lot of startups think it's cool to tell people that they work hard. I think realistically in Silicon Valley, I don't think there's that many companies that are actually working 996. So for everyone's context, 996 also started mostly in China. The labor market in China is like very unbalanced. It's super employer favored. And so employers can push people extremely hard. And so the culture becomes one where people are just like working all the time. I think in the US, a lot of startups just find it motivating to work hard. And so, I mean, we don't have any like sort of rules on how like when someone needs to be in the office, but we try to find people that join us because they want to work hard and they want Decagon to be ideally the highlight of their career, where they'll in 10 years they'll look back and hopefully they're still here, but if they're not, they look back and they're like, oh wow, that was like the place where I worked with the best people and I was the most motivated because we were making so much progress. And so because of that, people end up working longer hours. Ashwin and I, we actually live in my co-founder Ashwin and I, we actually live in the same building. So I'm convinced to move to our building, and so our office is very nearby. And so it's very easy for us to go in on Sundays, and as a result, a group of people also come in. But there's no mandate. It's kind of just like there's a lot of work to do. And I think that's true for a lot of AI startups in the Valley, where people just feel very motivated and they're having a lot of fun, and so they work harder. But I do think, like, assigning terms like this, I think I mentioned this with the forward deployed engineers as well. Like, I think people like having these terms so they can talk about it, but I don't think realistically that many companies are working 996.
What is it like to work at Decagon? Like, how do you filter out the people who don't want to work that hard, or versus the people who really want to work hard on the mission on Decagon? And is there anything that you do to enforce that sort of work hard mentality or culture?
So I mean, there's the high level things you can do where it's just kind of you talk about the level of intensity and so on, right? We talk a lot about having like a winning culture, a winner's mindset, where people are here because they like winning, and they try really hard, and they get rewarded by that, and they find it fulfilling, and so you try to attract those type of people. But I think the biggest thing I've learned is that yeah, you want to find people that are very spiky, where they have like outlier things that they're either good at or outlier personality traits. And I think one thing I've realized is most outlier traits are not like strictly positive or strictly negative. You want to kind of, as a person building a team, you want to have like a good understanding for like, okay, certain traits, if you leverage them correctly, could be very positive, and others, but the same traits, if you kind of put them in the wrong situation, could be negative. And one example is, a lot of salespeople are generally like fairly aggressive, and that's like usually a good trait because it allows them to keep going. And so a lot of this sort of like people that work really hard and aggressive, if you put them in the right situation and you can really channel that, then they end up getting good results. But that same trait could also allow them to, someone could also describe a trait as like, oh, they're reckless, or not fun to work with, or whatever, because they're like always pushing back or like asking for more resources and so on. So I think to build like a high performing team, you have to like recognize that people with really sharp outlier qualities, if you kind of leverage in the right way, that can be really positive, and otherwise it's not. And so you kind of just need that understanding.
Awesome. Question about FDE. So like, how do you think about pricing around FDE?
I think in the early days, you don't need to think too much about pricing. You can essentially just amortize it into the cost of your product. But over time, a lot of what you'll realize is a lot of the big enterprises, they have a separate budget for services. And so you can actually try to pull the spend of the FDEs from there. And so you have your main software product, they're paying this much for it, and then there's like a separate services spend that goes towards the FDEs. You could try to do it that way.
So many enterprise clients demand clear proof of reliability and transparency. Like, what's your approach to earning their trust? And how do you sort of provide the evidence?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So there's a lot of different ways to do this, I suppose. I mean, for us, we try to design a process that gives them comfort that we're catching all the bad things and enforcing all the rules and so on. And so with a conversational AI agent, there's a lot of work you can do beforehand. So we call that simulations, where you're simulating conversations and checking against the rules. And then during the conversation, there's a bunch of sort of guardrails in place as well to make sure it never goes off the rails. And then after the conversation, you can also review the conversations to make sure that the rules are being followed. We're looking for all the gaps and so on. So a lot of it is just designing a process where you're showing them the full capabilities of your product and making it clear that you're thinking about all these edge cases and you're thinking about all the ways that something could go wrong. And that makes it a lot easier to kind of get through the reliability and the security hurdles.
Let's see. There is a specific question around AOPs. What does the user interface look like? Is it like an XML format, or is it more like a sort of GUI where you have actually like workflows being displayed as a GUI?
Oh, it's literally just like a Google Doc almost. So it looks like an instruction manual. You're just writing a Google Doc. So This image kind of shows it where you're just kind of like writing almost like steps for what it should do and instructions it should follow. And then you have a bunch of, sort of like keywords you can use to call out to tools or to force it to do certain things or write like a conditional or so on.
Interesting. So there's a question around BPOs, like AI BPOs. So there hasn't been a really, really strong sort of player that's sort of replaced BPOs, especially in call centers. Is it a matter of time that, Decagon or some other player will figure out this market, or is there some other like structural issue where it's very hard to replace BPOs?
I mean, I would argue that we're already replacing BPOs in a way where let's say, for example, let's just say they had no automation before and BPOs were handling all of the conversations. If we come in, we do a good job, we're handling now, 75% of the conversations. Now all of a sudden, like 3/4 of the BPO has been replaced by an AI agent, right? And that will only increase over time, and so there will be more and more replacement. There are like AI-powered BPOs, I suppose, where you have the people and you have the AI agent. I think those just haven't worked out as well because it's kind of hard to blend a full services business with a software business. But I do think, I think it's a fair statement to say that AI agents like us are replacing the BPOs directly.
Do you see traditional call center players pose a threat to Decagon? It appears that call centers players with deeper operation knowledge are trying to, I guess, incorporate AI into their own workflows. But do you have any sort of views around that?
Yeah, of course. So I think if you're building an AI agent, you always need a healthy amount of respect for the bigger platforms and our underlying platforms where maybe if they add AI later, it might eat into your business. I think so far none of them have really had like any product that is on par with the modern AI agents. I think the reason for that is that it actually is quite difficult to build one of these things and build it in a way where it's, again, like I was saying before, easy to maintain, easy to iterate. And so when one of these folks kind of has a product at that level, then maybe we'll spend more time thinking about it. But I think it's just generally these are big companies, they're slow moving. This is also not what they specialize in. And so I think they've been quite a bit behind.
Are you ever sort of fearful, or do you ever think about like Salesforce or OpenAI like directly competing with you guys?
For sure. I think I'll put that in the same category where you need to have like, again, respect for these big companies because they have way more distribution than us. But for us, like for any startup in our position, you have to win on the product side. If you didn't have as good of a product as them, then you don't really deserve to win. And so our job is to make sure that our product is always quite a bit ahead, so that when someone kind of is evaluating us and they're like, oh, well, we're already on Salesforce, let's check out what Salesforce has, that you don't want those to be close.
How much time do you spend on sort of understanding competitors or the direction they're going or what they're building and those kind of things?
I think you do want to spend time on it. So we have dedicated competitive intel people on our team, and their job is to make sure we have a good understanding of other folks. But at the same time, you don't want to build your roadmap like around what competitors are doing, because then by definition, you're just going to be following other people. So you want to build your roadmap around what customers are saying, and you want to spend a ton of time understanding customers and talking to them and so on, and that informs your roadmap. But you should still be informed of customers, so that sometimes that's an input to making a strategic decision.
How do you decide what is fast enough? Because there are companies like Cursor or Replit or those guys that are growing at insane speed, and it feels like there's always someone growing faster than you, right? Like, how do you think about like what's the right velocity for Decagon?
Yeah, we don't really think about that. I think we're growing as fast as you can, right? So it's very important for you to I think this is true in general. If I talk to younger me, or like when I was building my first company, like you want to kind of do a bit more introspection to understand what you are good at and what is the right company and the type of strategy for you to take, because not everyone's good at the same things, and also people have different personalities, they have different circumstances, they know different people, and so you don't want to index too much on what other people are doing. They have different strengths than you and different talents and so on, and so you can use them as a data point, but generally you just want to focus on yourself and your own company and just grow as fast as you can. In terms of benchmarks, yeah, I would say like you try to benchmark yourself to like similar companies, like the you mentioned Cursors or Claude Code or like these are more like PLG type products, and so they will grow extremely fast. We're more of like a top-down enterprise, SaaS motion, and so those it would be insane if someone could grow that fast. But generally, they're slower, and so you want to benchmark yourself to other people that are selling to the same segment of the market, ideally.
Are you on founder mode right now, or what are you spending most time on right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're such a young company still. I don't know what founder mode versus not founder mode means still, but yeah, I mean, Ashwin and I are still very much in the weeds. If I had to break down my time these days, it's a lot of sales, hiring, and then kind of just like figuring out how to make larger strategic decisions, like get us more publicity, or like figure out like how to really communicate our differentiation and stuff like that.
Nice. And for a closing question, this has been a lot of pleasure, by the way. If you had to give one piece of advice to yourself, to your past self, maybe it's a year ago, or maybe right when you were getting started with Decagon, what would it be?
You want to ignore most of the noise. There's like so much advice floating out there. So yeah, I guess my advice would be to not listen to most of the advice, because it's very distracting. And when I was building my first company, I would look at all these stories of successful founders, or news articles or blog posts and so on, and you're like, oh, cool, like that makes sense. Like let's try to apply that to me. And you end up wasting a lot of time, and it also can take you off track very easily, because again, like every business is different. They're also in different stages, and they're also done by different founders who have like different strengths and different networks and so on. So like when people give advice, they're kind of distilling a long journey into like something that's pretty bite-sized, and if you try to internalize that too much, it's just like it can really just waste a bunch of time. And so I think with Decagon, I think one thing we did a good job of was we stayed like pretty focused, and didn't really listen to that much advice, and like stayed pretty first principles throughout the process, because when we first started, everyone told us, including people that we have a lot of respect for, were like, this space is probably like too crowded because it's too obvious, and all the incumbents will do it as well. But the reason we decided to double down is we were talking to a ton of customers, and a lot of them were very eager to work with us, and were even willing to pay. I think our first couple contracts, we had like a couple of six-figure contracts. And when you have zero revenue, that's very attractive. And so it's just like, okay, people are really willing to pay to work with just two random people that they didn't really know. And so that means that there must be something here. And I think that's what allowed us to have the conviction to keep building. And luckily, we did keep pushing. And in hindsight, it's easy for me to reflect on like why there was an opportunity in this space at the time. But if we listened too much to canonical advice, we might have not done this.
Awesome. Really appreciate you spending time with us in Japan. I know you're only here for 30 hours, literally. So thanks for your time, and it's been great.
Yeah, thanks so much. I was really excited to come here because of course everyone loves visiting Tokyo, and my wife actually studied abroad here when she was in college, so I heard a lot about it. But I'm just glad I was able to come here. So thank you all.
Thank you. ありがとうございます。